You've been on like what, thousands of listing presentations over the course of your career, Gary?
Yeah, and at one point in my career, I was averaging 6 listing appointments every single week.
So when it comes to listing presentations and listing appointments, you've pretty much perfected this process.
I don't mean to brag, but I do know a thing or two about them.
Well, this is exciting because Gary's going to share with us the 5 biggest mistakes agents make, even seasoned professionals make when it comes to a listing appointment. Before we dig in, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. Well, welcome to the Chris and Gary Show. I'm Chris Scott, joined by my partner in crime here, Gary Kreth, and we're here to talk about all things real estate. And we've been around the block a few times since we've been in the industry collectively for over 50 years. So we're going to try and keep you from going off the rails. We'll be releasing a new episode every single Thursday. So if you like what you're seeing, be sure to like and subscribe so that you'll know every time a new episode comes out. And if you want to take the conversation to the next level, go ahead on over to thepaperlessagent.com or follow us on Instagram to get more tips, tools, and resources. Gary, let's dive into these. The first of these 5 listing appointment mistakes that agents make. What's the first one?
Well, so what I noticed, the first thing that we do in real estate is that we give up control of the appointment. Last time I checked, it's my appointment. It's not the seller's appointment. This is my appointment. I'm the professional. I'm supposed to be in control.
Time out for a second. How do we end up giving up control of the appointment? I mean, it is our appointment, right? So how do we end up giving control away?
Well, here's what normally happens. Are you cool if we role play this for just a second?
Let's do it. Sure.
Okay, so here's what normally happens. I, as a realtor, that's me, I knock on the door. You seller, you come to the door.
All right. I open the door. Oh, hey, you must be Gary.
Yes. Hey, Chris, I'm Gary with XYZ Realty. It's nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you. You want to come on in and take a tour of the house?
Sure. That sounds great.
All right, let's do it.
So what just happened here? Let's dissect this for a second, because I think so many people in real estate, we do this because this is just natural for us to do, because this is what I would do. Like, Chris, take this for example. Very first time I ever came to your house, I knocked on the door. You're like, hey, Gary, come on in. You want to take a tour around? I was like, yeah.
Take a look around.
Was I there for a listing appointment?
No, you're a social occasion. You're going to check things out.
Exactly. I'm not here for a social occasion or engagement. At this point, I'm here for a listing appointment. And so if we treat it as a social engagement, keep in mind who is in control during an entire social engagement. The homeowner.
The host.
Right. That cannot be here, because we as real estate professionals must take control of the appointment. And it goes a little bit deeper psychologically. I'm not going to get too deep into this because we can go really deep into the weeds here. But also, if we give up control like this, it makes us just like every other single real estate agent out there. And here's what's going to happen. Every other agent who goes to that house is going to say the exact same thing. Sure, let's take a look at your house. Sure, let's tour your home. I can't wait to see your home. Instead, we're going to flip the script. And by flipping the script, we're going to change the direction. We're going to change the velocity of this entire conversation. So
it seems like,
the trajectory is going to be mine, not yours.
It seems like a big deal if you think about, all right, I'm the professional, as a real estate, you're the professional, right? So you're the one who knows what's supposed to happen in this situation. I think of it as like you go to the doctor's office and let's say you have some kind of ailment. The doctor doesn't say, so what do you think we ought to do for this diagnosis, right? Like, no, they tell you what's up. They're going to ask you how you feel. They'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then they tell you what's up. You don't say like, yeah, doc, I want you to go ahead and x-ray it.
Very, very first thing. Let's think about this. Doctor's appointment. You get called back by the nurse. Does the nurse sit there and say, so you want to take a tour around and just pick a room? Hell no. What happens
here's a menu of options
and they say, you're going to sit in this chair right here, and you're going to wait here in room number 3 until the doctor comes in.
I always feel like they put me in my place first, because they'll say, first, before you walk in there, go step on the scale. It's like, okay, here's the shame time, right? So first they have you step on the scale, and then they put you in the room, and then they always tell you where to sit.
But this is, it's well thought out. It's strategic. It's not just lackluster. Oh, what should we do here? No. This is well thought out, and our listing appointments should be absolutely no different. They must be well thought out from the moment we knock on the door to the moment the first words come out of our mouth, to the moment we get them signing on the listing agreement and we walk out the door. Everything must be strategic and scripted. We'll talk about the breakdowns of what happens when you don't do that in a minute. But this is a really big deal.
What should they do instead?
Here's what we should do instead. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, you must be Gary.
Yeah, you should probably oil your hinges there, Chris. I think they're really squeak. No.
Well, it's for the sound effect for the audience.
Okay, I understand. So you open the door and I'm like, hey, Chris, I'm Gary with XYZ Realty. It's very nice to meet you.
Oh, hey, would you want to come in and take a look around the house?
You know what, Chris? I cannot wait to inspect your home with you. But first, if you don't mind, I would love to sit down with you at your kitchen table and review what we talked about during our phone consultation. Does that work for you?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
So I flipped the script. Instead of touring a house and spending a lot of time with them showing off their house and not knowing what to do next, and then going and sitting down and doing this whole listing presentation about how awesome I am. No. What we're doing is we're going to go sit down. This is where what I call, it's called verification. We're verifying, we're validifying what they said during the phone consultation to make sure that everything is still the same. Plus, this differentiates me from everybody else. Plus, this allows me to clarify anything that may have changed. Plus, it shows the seller that, wow, Gary really was listening during that phone consultation, and he took a lot of detailed notes.
I noticed you never said no, though. When I said, hey, you want to take a look around the house, you didn't say no.
Right.
Why didn't you say no?
So that's a psychological thing that I instituted into my practice about 14 years ago. And after studying a lot of psychological sales, what I've learned is we don't want to reject anything that our clients say or reject anything that they offer. I'll even take this a step further. Quite often, we as realtors, we get excited going to a listing appointment. We're drinking coffee and water on the way to the appointment. We get there and we're like, oh man, I should not have had that much water because now I need to go to the bathroom. What happens is when we get to their house and we follow this process, what happens is as we get to their kitchen table, do you know what room we pass through to get to the kitchen table?
The kitchen.
The kitchen. And you know what naturally happens is that they are going to offer you a beverage. Never say no. Always accept. Always accept. Even if you don't touch it. Here's a prime example. I was in East Austin and I went to this gentleman's home, and his nickname was Shorty. It's because he was really, really short. But I got to his home, and it was an Hispanic family, and they were wanting to sell their house because of gentrification. Their values had skyrocketed, and they wanted to take the money and set money aside for the kiddos and buy a smaller house, all these things. So anyway, we get there, and it's 10 in the morning. And we walk through the kitchen to the kitchen table, and he turns to me and he goes, hey, you want a beer or a shot of tequila?
It's 10:30.
Shorty. It's like 10 in the morning. He's like, yeah, but this is what we do. I said, I will have what you're having. Now, did I drink with him? No, not until he signed the listing agreement. I think it's really important, especially in such a diverse, multicultural kind of community that we live in, is that there are a lot of different sort of practices around having tea or coffee or certain, social things like that. And so we always want to accept what they're offering. That allows them to then think, oh, Gary's a good guy. He just accepted my offer. If I said, oh, no, thank you, it's like, well, what's wrong with my water?
Well,
what's wrong with my coffee? What's wrong with my tea?
Interesting. If you look at like Japanese culture, if you decline something that was offered, it's actually considered offensive. Now they won't say anything about it, A common business practice, for example, in Japan is the exchange of the business card, right? There's a process and a method to exchange business cards. Well, many times Americans don't know that, right? And then, so it's like, oh, thanks for the card, and just jam it in their pocket, not realizing they just offended the crap out of the Japanese business person. And so same thing, like if they offer you tea, it would be offensive to say, no, thank you. Right. So interesting,
So
like just when you look at
all
other
of these
cultures.
things, all of these things are very, very important to take note of. And, we may joke about it here from time to time on this show, but we joke about it just because we like having fun. But the reality is all of these points are really, really important when it comes to the psychology of the relationship between you and your client.
Garry, let's get into the second most common mistake that agents make on their listing appointment. What is the second one?
And it's so obvious, but I think we miss it. And I think that's what's so painful about it being so obvious, is that not giving people a reason to hire you.
Not giving people a reason to hire you. Huh.
Yeah. So
What do you
think
mean
about
by
this.
that?
Not many of these stores are open anymore, but if you went to an Office Max or an Office Depot, right? You walk in, you go and you need a pen. This is not a pen that you need for a special closing. This is just a pen to take notes with. Mm-hmm. And you walk down the pen aisle, there are hundreds of different pens there, and they all functionally do exactly the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Which pen are you going to select for just taking notes that day?
Probably the cheapest one. That looks
the cheapest one.
Get the job done.
Yes. And it's because they all look the same. Mm. Now, are they the same? Probably not, but they probably have not done a great job of this differentiation. Mm. The thing is that if you as a real estate agent encounter this more than once in a year, then what this says is you are not giving your clients a good reason to hire you, and you are not doing a good job differentiating yourself. If they ask this question, Chris, do you know what this question is?
Has something to do with fees, right? Will you
discount your commission? Mm. And it doesn't have to be, will you discount your commission? It could be, hey, will you do it for this percentage amount because so-and-so down the road said they would. Hey, I looked online and this company said they'll do it for that.
Right, so at that point, what you're saying, and as someone who's in marketing and real estate marketing, communicating and articulating our value is part of the point behind the marketing that we produce. A lot of times we might think more short term, like, I got to generate a lead, or I got to market this listing, or I need to do this open house. But the goal, the objective is to articulate your value and hopefully give people reasons to hire you, concrete reasons to hire you, so that they're not going to shop on price. In fact, I know from working with you that there's a lot of great tools out there that we can actually use in real estate to communicate and articulate our value. And when we use them, and maybe we can give them an example of what one of those tools are, but when we do that, there's never a conversation about fees because they see and view you as the professional that they need to hire, right? Like Gary's the only one guy I can trust. Gary's professionalism. I know he's an expert.
Whoa, time out. What did you just say?
I can trust Gary's professionalism.
That word.
Trust.
So a lot of people say, okay, differentiation. Now, here's one thing I will caution everybody against. Differentiation is not always good. You can differentiate yourself in a way that it is taken negatively by your customer base. So that's not what we're saying. It's like differentiating yourself in a way that builds superior trust with your customer, so that when they are thinking about real estate, they're thinking about you. When they are interviewing other real estate listing agents, they're thinking about what you provided them, what knowledge you have shared with them versus what the one sitting across the table has shared with them. That is the powerful differentiation, is the one that builds superior trust with your customer.
I like to think of building superior trust as a competitive advantage, because quite frankly, when it comes to real estate and really all professional services, in order for us to beat our competition, all we have to do is have the client or the prospective client trust us a little bit more, right? And so that is not that's not very hard to do. It's not like I got to have this scale of this infinitely perfect trust, perception around trust. You just have to trust me more than the next person. And I can do that relationally. I can do that by articulating and communicating my value. There's a lot of ways that I can show somebody and build trust, because trust is a Well, we build trust by, showing our competence and then showing our character, right? Can I trust you to get the job done well, and can I trust you to put my needs before your own? That's what those two questions answer. And so trust, just having enough of it, or more than the next person, is all we need oftentimes to get the deal. Now, I think that building that superior trust can be a reputation or part of your reputation, right?
Well, and here's where I think that we miss is that it doesn't just get the job done that day.
Mm.
It doesn't just get me the listing agreement signed that day. By building superior trust, especially by using some tools that we'll talk about in a second, what this does is it differentiates us so much that then our sellers are willing and eager to share that information with friends and family members who are about to transact as well. And they're like, oh, you're thinking about buying a house? Oh, you're thinking about selling a house? Oh, you're thinking about investing? You have to call Garry. And that is, when that happens, when that flips, that's when I'm doing something right here.
Well, did you know, I know you know this, but as the viewer, did you know that according to the National Association of Realtors, the number one determining factor that sellers use in choosing their real estate professional is the listing agent's reputation? That is
Correct.
the number one determining factor. And, once you view that as the priority, because if you want to get more listings, you need to work with more sellers, and knowing that sellers value the reputation, that's what they're going to use to decide, should I hire you or you? Reputation is the equivalent of trust, right? And so when we understand that, we can build a reputation around trust, and that will enable us not to just make our clients happy, but get more of them in the first place, which I think is exciting. Let's get into the third of the most common mistakes that real estate agents and brokers make when it comes to their listing appointment. What's the third one, Garry?
Well, it's the biggest mistake I've ever made.
What's that?
And that is not sending a pre-listing packet.
What is a pre-listing packet?
So what a pre-listing packet does is it preemptively, ethically sabotages your competition by educating the client about who you are, what your value proposition is, what's going to happen during the listing appointment, and how you plan to market and sell their home differently than other agents. So this is a very, very powerful tool that we can utilize before we even show up for a listing appointment. And when I say ethically sabotaging your competition, what this can actually do and has done for me is it causes my home seller to cancel appointments with the other agents they were going to interview because the other agents did not send something like this. And so when we are differentiating ourselves at such a high level by sending this information out, by becoming that expert, by building trust, by differentiating ourselves and having that superior trust, what it does is it creates this comfort in the seller's mind that Gary's going to take care of me. I don't need to waste my time and meet with other people. Look at what he just sent me. I used to send out just a letter and a few items, and you're like, oh, what if we sent this? What if we added this to it? What if we did some videos? Can you share with us kind of the different aspects of what you think needs to go into a pre-listing packet? By the way, I do want to share with everybody before you ask the questions in the chat below, before you ask this, like, when do you send this out? Within minutes after hanging up the phone with them, after my initial phone consultation, within minutes.
So you schedule, you have your initial consultation with this prospective seller. You're setting the appointment during that time. And as soon as you set that appointment, hang up the phone, you're preparing that pre-listing packet. In this case, we use a pre-listing packet email. So we're sending that email with this information immediately prior to the appointment taking place, right?
Correct.
That's the timing of it. So what should go into our pre-listing packet? First and foremost, I think a good compass to use is, what are the things that I'm going to be talking about, or what would I normally talk about, or questions that I might normally answer during a listing appointment that I can answer beforehand, right? And I think this is powerful because it's going to save you time, for one thing, and people are going to see you as being the provider of this information. You're helping to educate them on questions that they knew they were going to have, that they were going to ask you, and it's like, oh wow, he's already answered this question for me. What a pro. What a pro, right? So,
you just talked about answering questions that they were going to have. it's not just that. It's also, I see so many people in the marketplace today as real estate agents wanting to learn, how do I overcome objections? What are some scripts and dialogues I can use for this? And I said, why? Why don't you handle an objection before it even becomes an objection?
Yeah.
Because all an objection is ignorance about our services and our fees. That's all. It's just ignorance. It's ignorance.
It's a
about
gap
what
in
we're going to do.
understanding. It's a gap in understanding. And as the professional, as the one in control, that is actually our responsibility to close that gap. And to be frank, so many of these questions can be answered before the appointment. In fact, they shouldn't fester into, I think of objections as concerns that they had that when unanswered, that festered into a problem.
That is a very good point. And now there are two places we answer these. Like we handle objections before they become objections. The first place is in this pre-listing packet. The second place is during the listing presentation. We'll talk about that in a second. But Chris, what else goes into a pre-listing packet?
So I'll share with you what we include in ours. We actually, the first section of our pre-listing packet, so it's an email. One of the things we point out, just remind people of the appointment. So they're like, okay, I'm going to see you Friday at 5:00. But then we have 3 educational videos that are on our YouTube channel that we link to. Now, you don't have to use videos. You could write a blog post on it, but we like to answer 3 questions that we know they have. The first is, what should they expect from the real estate agent and how to hire a good one? I want to establish those criteria so that they can see that we're comfortable enough to be able to show them and explain to them, here's what you should be looking for. We hope that's us. But here, regardless of whether you make that decision, here's what you should expect from your real estate professional. I know a question that they're going to have is what I need to do to get my home ready for sale. Big question. That's probably one of the first things that they're going to ask you when you get to that point in the conversation is like, well, what do you think we ought to do to get the home ready for sale? So we can answer that long before. We answer that, again, through a video, but you could also write a blog post about answering the most common and frequent things and things that people can do to get their home ready for sale. The third thing that we like to do is talk a little bit about, how we're going to go about producing results, right? Like, how do we market a home and what goes into the marketing of the home? We actually have this little dialogue. We call it the 3P dialogue, which is there's an old way of selling real estate and a new way of selling real estate. And the old way of selling real estate, people would use the old 3Ps of selling real estate, which is they would put a sign in the yard, they would put the listing in the MLS, and then they would pray that it sells. And so those are the old 3Ps. We don't use those old 3Ps. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who still use them, but here's what we do. We focus on preparation, pricing, and promotion. And so what we do is explain to them that through proper preparation and pricing and promotion and our strategies around that are going to help to drive buyer demand and get them ultimately top dollar. So that is setting up the marketing conversation that we're going to have, because those videos, or like say you were going to use blog posts, that answers questions that they're going to have. I like that last one around the 3Ps because it sets up the second very, very important piece, perhaps maybe the most important piece of the pre-listing packet, which is we include our property marketing plan. And that's just simply a document that outlines everything kitchen sink wise that we're going to do to prepare, list, and market that home and get them buyers. And so think of it as a marketing plan or proposal specifically for that listing. So we use that to articulate our value. The reason why we started doing that, well, there's twofold. I ended up coming up with this originally because we were prospecting expireds. This is literally like 10 years ago. We were prospecting expireds, and one of our agents handed me the phone and said, hey, the seller wants to know what we're going to do to market the home. And I was like, okay. I mean, I literally took a cold call of sorts from one of our agents in the office. So I was explaining, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to optimize it for SEO by using these strategies. And then the prospective seller was like, man, that sounds like you guys really know what you're talking about. I'll be there tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I was like, okay. So then I thought, I handed the phone back to the agent. It was her cell phone. So I gave it back to her and she was like, hey, do you think you could put what you just said into like some writing or something so that when he comes in, we could review it? And if you could be there at 10, I was like, okay. So I spent like the next 7 hours that evening typing out this property marketing plan. And lo and behold, like we got that listing. And it was because he pointed out, this is phenomenal. You explained all the questions that I have, and this was an engineer, right? So he had a lot of detailed questions, and so that property marketing plan gave him the confidence that was necessary. I later did research from National Association of Realtors, and one of the things that I learned is, again, according to National Association of Realtors, the top prioritized task that sellers have is to market the home to prospective buyers. And so when they're hiring their agent, first, like we mentioned earlier, they're going to make the determining factor, the decision based on a reputation. But the thing they want us to do is to market that home. And our property marketing plan is the way that we can show them we have the competence and ability to do so. There's one more piece of information that we like to include in our pre-listing packet. Now, we recently did an update. Before, we actually had the seller do some homework, and we would ask them questions like, hey, be sure before the appointment to call the bank and get your loan balance. And we'd also ask them to provide us a room-by-room description of any highlight features that they have in the house. And we would use that to help craft our marketing narrative or the listing description. We recently swapped that out to include our actual listing presentation. Garry had us redesign it because he felt it was very important to be able to share his listing presentation. We use a template to do so. He wanted to be able to share that beforehand so that someone could really quickly assess, oh, this is why I should hire Garry. And then when we would go, it's more of a review of that information.
Oh,
so
it saves me so much time. Saves me so much time during my listing presentations. I mean, they become a breeze after they receive all of that information.
Yeah, I think a good example, Garry, is that one listing in was it Barton Springs, where you were competing against several other like really good listing agents, and the reason they said they hired you instead of them was they called it our go-to marketing plan or our go-to market plan, but it was our property marketing plan. And I think you were telling some folks you knew you had that listing, even though there was some really top dogs competing for it, when you saw that property marketing plan printed out sitting on their coffee table, right? Like that's when you know, oh, this strategy works really, really well. All right, Garry, we've talked about what some of the most common mistakes are. Let's get into the fourth most common mistakes agents make when it comes to listing appointments. What's the fourth one?
Winging it.
What do you mean?
Just showing up and flying by the seat of your pants, or riffing it, or winging your listing appointment without a guide. I've actually done this. Chris has been there when I did this on a $2.5, $2.7 million listing. I thought I had the listing. I didn't show up with my iPad. I didn't pull it out. I did not show the listing presentation, and I just winged it. And the listing presentation is not a tool to show how awesome I am. What it is it is a tool to guide the conversation to help the seller understand the value that we bring to the table. And when I didn't have my guide, even though I've been doing this for 26 years, I lost that listing. And that's what it is it creates a guide for the key conversations that we need to have that answer the questions that we already know that they have in their mind, so that they don't become objections, and instead they become trust building conversations. And that is one of the biggest mistakes, is not having not just a listing presentation, but like a stellar listing presentation.
So, and not probably just the listing presentation document or template like that we use, but an actual process of what you're going to do, right? We started today by saying that oftentimes we give up control. Well, for you, I know it's very systematic. You're going to go from 1 step to 2 step to 3 step to 4 step to 5 steps. All of these steps need to happen in the same sequence every time, right? If you skip a step, part of the value proposition might be missing, and maybe you can't ask for them to sign the agreement because you missed a critical step. So let's talk about then, within that listing presentation, there's conversations that take place, right? You said it's a guide.
That's true. It's not everything that we need to talk about. And by the way, if you send this beforehand, like I do, it actually reduces the amount of conversation that you have to have around this. And it really just touches on the things that they need clarification on, or that are really, really important to them. And over the years, what we found is that there are 3 primary conversations that are key that we need this listing presentation to guide us through. Number 1, how is the market? This question, every single home buyer, every single home seller, anybody interested in real estate, they need to know how's the market. And if you go in there and you talk about what the national news media is talking about, how the real estate market is, you lose.
Mm.
And
Well, I
here's
think it's
why.
why.
It's not a national market.
Mm.
The real estate market is hyper local, and you have to have specific knowledge about statistically what is happening in your city, in your sub market, in your neighborhood, so that you can then share with the client what it means to them. You might want to write this down with them. What's in it for me? This is what they're thinking. So as we're sharing how the market is, we always need to say, and Chris, what this means to you in this specific market, in this specific neighborhood, in your specific home is this. So we need to give them the information and interpret it for them.
I think of the how's the market conversation, particularly in the context of a listing appointment, is so critical to set the expectations around time and price, because those are the two questions they have. Like, how much are you going to sell my home for,
Yep.
and how quickly are you going to do it, right? And so being able to lay the groundwork so they have an understanding of what's going on in the market, right? Especially if there's been shifts and changes in your market, they need to know that. And if they're paying attention to national media, they're not getting it. They have actually now a misinformed set of expectations. So we have to address how's the market so they can now see, oh, that's what's going on. And here's what that means for me. And here's what my expectations should be around moving forward. What's the second conversation that needs to happen? Because I know it's connected to that one.
It is, and it's the what we call us versus them, and what this is this is a conversation around how we are outperforming our competition, how we are outperforming the average real estate agent in the marketplace, how we are going to do better for you than the competition. And you need to have statistics around this. You need to show the two primary statistics that they're worried about, like you talked about just a moment ago, Chris, and that is how fast and for how much. So you need to have the statistics and compare yourself to an average realtor in your marketplace of how quickly are you or your firm selling houses versus the average realtor. How much compared to list price is your sales price compared to the average realtor? Calculate these numbers, and then interpret what that means to them. And the way we do that is we actually say, hey, Chris, let's assume that we sell your house for $450,000. Well, on average, Kreth Partners is selling homes for 3.45% more than the average realtor in the marketplace. And what this means to you is X number of dollars. That is true power, that is true knowledge, and that is a true expert.
Well, that shows them several things, several layers, right? You've got, on one level, you're showing them that you track your performance, and really only professionals track their performance. Think about it. How many of us track our performance in certain areas of real estate? Well, if you're tracking how you're doing in these areas and comparing it to the competition, it shows people you're very serious. Another thing is, I noticed you seeded a price there, right? You did a little seeding of price, assuming we sell your home for $400,000. But then you took that, what was it, 3.45%? Which, as you were thinking, I was thinking about, I was like, well, that doesn't mean anything until you translate that into dollars, right? And so when you've translated that percentage into dollars, now that's staring in their face as to, oh, I should hire Garry because his firm, they're going to make me more money. That's why I need to do it, right? And so I think that's a very powerful way to use market information and comparing yourself to the average to show the actual benefit. Garry, now a very common question I know viewers might be thinking is, what if I'm not outperforming the market? What if I'm really terrible? But
well, it's
talk
not,
a little bit about
so this that. This is not about you. This is about your firm. This is about your brokerage. This is about your team. You need to gather that data and use the power of the group. Okay. And by the way, if your numbers are not outperforming the average in your marketplace, then there's something wrong with your calculation. I'm just going to say that you're missing a key component there, because how do I know that? In decades of teaching realtors how to do this, nobody has ever, once accurately interpreting the data, nobody has ever underperformed the average realtor in the marketplace, simply because there are so many outliers of properties that skew the data that will make you look better. So this is using those outliers to your benefit.
And if you're still calculating, that might be a different conversation to have. Maybe you're hanging out with the wrong people. You know what I mean?
Could be. You never know. Now we have to share how we get the results, and that really brings in and sums up and synopsisizes, is that's the word it is now, the entire property marketing plan. We're just going to bring it in and summarize it, so and remind them of everything that we're going to do to achieve the results that we get for our other clients.
Yeah, I think you could do a callback, right? Like at that point in the conversation, because if you don't talk about how you get the result, I could see how that would linger, because I'm like, there's no way he's going to outperform the market. How could he do that? There's no way. And then, but if you say, perhaps, did you get a chance to review that property marketing plan? Oh, yeah, actually I did. I just want to point a few key things out there. But before we did, do you have any questions about it? Well, no, why don't you just talk about what we're going to be doing there? So now you have a chance, and you do this through the listing presentation. You can have examples of some of the marketing that you're going to do, but you're really trying to do a callback to the essence of that property marketing plan. So now when they were thinking, how's he going to do that? Oh, question answered. Yep. And that's why the more thorough you can be in your property marketing plan, right, the more thoroughly it answers that question. Garry, let's get into the fifth and final most common mistake that agents make when it comes to listing appointments.
This can be a painful one, and here's why. We can do all the right things all the way through the first 4 steps, but what if we're talking to the wrong person?
So we had to make sure the right people are at the appointment.
We have to make sure, and this is decision maker time. This is where we have to set this up during the initial phone consultation, making sure, hey, I want to make sure that anybody who is a decision maker in this process is going to be at the appointment. Who are the decision makers? And then confirm that they're going to be there. Because if the decision makers are not there, or the people who need to sign the listing agreement are not there, what happens is, Chris, do you remember this game when we were kids called Telephone?
Mm-hmm.
Where we would, you would sit in a circle, and one person would whisper a phrase to somebody else, and it goes all the way around. By the time it gets back around, is it even close to the same phrase that you started out with?
No, the first phrase might be, my cat. I have a cat. And the next thing you know, someone's talking about telephone wires and elephants, right?
And so the point is that we cannot rely on the other people in the appointment to accurately communicate our value to other decision makers in order to get them to agree to this whole thing. And if we do this once and all the decision makers are not there, we have to come back for a second appointment to make sure that that's done. One of the biggest ways that the biggest mistakes is made here is that if you have 2 people who own a property, husband and wife, partners, spouses, whatever, and one of them gets stuck at work, I every time will say, oh, is so-and-so here as well? Oh, no, he's stuck at work. If she's stuck at work, they can't make it. Oh, great. Do you mind if we get on the phone with them right now, and let's go ahead and reschedule this, because this is really important for both of you to be here at the same time. I do not do listing appointments for one decision maker and then come back or wait for them to relay the information correctly to the other person. It's just not going to happen, and I will lose that listing. And
because what happens is they'll say, all right, we'll get back to you, right? And then you lost it, because
that's the whole thing is, let me think about this overnight. We'll get back to you. I mean, when that happens, you walk out, and if you don't walk out with your head low because you just lost that appointment, then you weren't listening.
Yeah. I find that, with technology these days, like FaceTime and Zoom, right? You can, if someone's not going to, if you, during the initial consultation, like, hey, so is everyone going to be there who's involved with making the decision? They're like, oh yeah, but they're not going to be able to make it. Well, can they be on Zoom? Can we get them to come in digitally to this meeting? Because it's all about them being able to experience that value proposition that you're going to communicate.
That's a really good point, Chris, because sometimes some of the decision makers could be remote, like parents. Mm-hmm. If parents co-signed on a note and they have to sign off on the listing agreement for them to sell the house, get them on Zoom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, get them
military. We've worked with military folks where they were deployed when they had to, and they were getting ready for a move, and it's like, let's get them on Zoom.
Those are 5 critical mistakes that we can avoid, Chris, when really wanting to stand out and get listings for ourselves. And I find that they're not terribly difficult. They're not terribly complicated. What's critical is making sure that we have a system in place to make sure that we do this systematically every single time. And by the way, don't beat up on yourself if you drop the ball on one of these, because I do it still. It still happens to everybody. And so give yourself some grace, pick yourself up, and let's make sure on that next listing appointment that you avoid those 5 fatal mistakes.
Yeah, if you'd like to get some tools, some resources, some more information about how you can avoid some of these mistakes, I encourage you to go check out thepaperlessagent.com. We have a blog, we've got a website, lots of free resources there for you to check out, specifically around being able to manage this listing process and getting listings in the first place. If you've liked anything that you've heard today, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and also share this video. If you find someone else might be able to benefit from it, drop some comments in there, and we'll see you in the next episode.